Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan and Jonathan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are actress Sylva Kelegian and author Jonathan Worlde. Actress Sylva Kelegian was born in New York City and graduated from high school in Miami. She graduated at 16, and by 17 she was already at the executive secretarial school, and within the next year in New York. What were you planning to be when you got to New York?
I wanted to be a fashion designer back then.
Oh, and then you worked for?
Yeah, and I worked for Betsy Johnson. I worked for a Bass Shoe Company and things like that as a secretary, and then I worked for Betsy Johnson, and I kind of organized the production side of her company. This is before computers and before she had 100 people working for her.
But did you, then you did find your secretarial
Came
work.
in handy, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It fed me for the first 4 or 5 years I was in New York.
I was going to say, that was pretty boring going to secretarial school, but actually...
And it was executive secretarial school.
Excuse me,
so
what's the difference?
Everything was very prim and proper, and your shoes had to match your handbag, and, it was extremely... But it taught me a lot, and my typing skills today come in handy. I'm working on a children's book, and, I still type 90 words a minute, so...
Oh, so it really did help.
Really
and then, as you say, with Betsy before, and with Bass Shoes, I love Bass Shoes.
They were great. They were fabulous. I was just a receptionist secretary there.
But you were in the fashion business.
I was, yeah, and I wanted to start my own fashion company, and then I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do at all.
Then how did acting happen?
I went to see a friend of mine who I met at Bass Shoes. She was a shoe model, and she was in a play, and she shoe modeled during the day and did a play at night, and I went to see her play. And I sat in the theater watching her and her friends on the stage, and I thought, I'm supposed to do that.
You're kidding.
That's what I'm supposed to do.
Isn't that amazing? Weren't you afraid to think about that?
Well, I was terrified. I was terribly shy as a child. So the thought of being an actress, because theater people and creative people are in my family. But
they are?
They are. Writers, and my mother was a ballet dancer. My father was a pianist. My grandmother was a big radio actress for a day.
Oh, so why didn't you think about that right away?
Too shy. I was really, really shy and scared. So I would never have even, I was in the back of my mind, but the thought of doing it, the thought of getting on a stage was horrifying.
Well, then you had to start taking acting lessons.
So I did. I quit my job at Betsy Johnson, and to the horror of my family, because I was making very good money. And
probably Betsy. Did she teach you how to do cartwheels?
No, she never taught me how to do cartwheels, no. She worked mostly out of her studio, and I was in the production office in the showroom.
That's her big thing,
but
right?
I know it is, I know. Down the runway, I think.
Right.
Yeah. I haven't seen her in many years. But so I quit the job, and I started waitressing, as every young actress does.
That was like prerequisite.
Totally, absolutely. You got to learn to sling hash before you can get on stage.
Isn't that funny?
But it was good.
And then how'd you find teachers?
The group, my friend Tammy, who I had gone to see, she was with a coach, and her friends were with a coach, a very, very good coach called Warren Robertson.
So you just went right with them?
Yeah, I went with another coach out of that studio, and then kind of found my niche with another acting coach from the Actors Studio.
Oh, that was the great thing, that you fell into someone at the Actors Studio.
Yeah, her name was Elaine Aiken, and she had come out of the Actors Studio years before and was a wonderful, wonderful coach. And I auditioned the last year I studied with her for the Actors Studio and got in.
I know. How good were you by that time that you actually, that was
very
tough.
exciting. It was a year after I started studying, and it was really hard at that point to get in, and I did, and that was wonderful. And then Circle Rep, which was also a very big company there, and I got into those two groups.
So you stayed in actors at the Actors Studio?
I always worked, twice a week you'd go to your sessions and you'd do scenes, not every week, but as often as you could, you'd get up and do scenes. And they had moderators, Shelley Winters and Arthur Penn and Estelle Parsons and Ellen Burstyn and people like that would watch and moderate your work. Yeah, which was wonderful. It was a great experience, And then when I moved
you were
out
learning
here,
all the time.
Learning all the time, and then Circle Up. And I was also with a company called the Actors Gym, which actually a lot of the people in the play that I'm doing now come from the Actors Gym.
But were they from New York?
From
the
New York.
Actors Gym? Oh,
we
so
initially
did that
started in New York.
Did that bring you to Los Angeles?
That didn't. I actually came to Los Angeles because Patty Duke was doing a movie of her life. And always people said, Patty Duke, Patty Duke.
Right.
And I wrote her a letter. I had not done anything at this point except for free theater in New York. And I wrote her a letter and I said, I know you're doing the movie of your life and I'd love to do it. And she wrote me back saying, I don't think it's going to be done, but maybe it is. We'll see. Well, a year later it was done and I heard about it. I jumped on a plane, flew to LA, called the casting director and said, I had written her a letter a year previous and I'd love to get in on it, and turned out she was playing herself, so that was the end of that.
Oh, is that how it
She
happened?
ended up playing herself, yeah, so I never got to do that.
But here
it
you
got
were.
Me here. Well, then I went back to New York 5 years later, after kind of struggling here, went back to New York and got my career really going there, and met my husband at the Actors Studio in New York.
Who was also an actor.
Also an actor, Jude Cicolella.
But Jude Cicolella told me he didn't wait tables. He said he was too grumpy to wait tables.
I couldn't see him waiting
that
on the
he
table.
said he was doing
He'd throw the food in the person's face.
He said, that wasn't for me. And I said,
That's right.
Oh.
No, not at all. But I actually loved waiting tables. I found it enjoyable, meeting different people, and I liked it.
But then when you came back, you got your career actually going, because I saw
Right.
pictures of you in the New York Times. I remember seeing,
there was
here,
a play. I can't even remember which play that was from, but I did a lot of off-Broadway there, and some really, really good things, and a lot of guest spots on Law and Order, and leads in independent films, and
So you liked the theater, though?
I love theater. That's my first love. But I love TV and film as well.
You worked with Spielberg in
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can, and also with Raimi and Spider-Man.
Spider-Man,
So how do
yes.
they differ?
Very different in the sense that Spielberg, you can see, has been doing it for so long, and he's just kind of a master of his craft. When you go on a set, I also worked with
Scorsese and
thank
Jaglom.
you.
I was
Yes.
going to
And Jaglom,
compare
yes.
those, because I
Yeah.
saw that movie that Jaglom did.
You did?
Yeah,
the shopping movie.
Yeah,
I've yet to see it.
I've seen all of Jaglom's
I
movies.
haven't even seen it yet. But Scorsese, you go on these sets where these guys are masters at their craft, and some sets you step on and there's tension if someone's running the set. It's always very different. It's always a different kind of family.
That's why I wanted to ask you, because you've been with such a large group,
and
different group.
Scorsese and Spielberg. There's just this wonderful feeling of the father's in command and he knows what he's doing.
Oh, so,
and
so that's good.
It's wonderful.
And
yeah.
Jaglom is kind of more of a looser set, right?
Yeah, Jaglom's much looser. A lot of improv going on, a lot of screaming and throwing things, and it's a lot of craziness.
That's what that shopping and Jaglom brought me to the ensemble piece that you're doing, Blackout, which seems like it's the same kind of thing.
Oh, I see. That brings it to, yes, exactly.
To me.
Yeah, it is. The wonderful thing is, it's a lot of improv goes on the stage at night. We have
there's a play called Blackout,
yes.
and it's written by Gary Lennon.
It is.
And you're one of the permanent cast members.
I am.
And it's about?
It's about an AA meeting. It takes place at an AA meeting, and there are 13 characters, sometimes 12, sometimes 13. Every week, different guest celebrity people come and do it, and so usually there are 3 roles that people step out of, and then the guest people come in and do it.
And it's been running a long time. It started at the Hudson, and now it's at
the McCadden, yes, and now it's at the Egyptian, and it's been running 13 weeks, and we run until August 3rd. I've been in it every night except for one weekend.
So when and MJ Carmi's producing it, and she's also in it.
She is. She's wonderful.
And she, I thought, had this great idea to bring these guest artists in.
And it's great because it keeps the piece fresh. Every night we have different people to work with. And basically there's a series of monologues, people standing up and telling their life at an AA meeting. But through and in that, there's a lot of play between the characters. And every night it's very different. And as I said,
how scripted is it?
It's scripted in the monologues. The monologues are very scripted.
You have to do your monologue.
You have to do your monologue. You have to tell your story the way Gary has written it. Some people go off a little bit during the night, but it's not very.
But then how do you react to the other people who are doing it?
Because depending on the personalities that come in, there's a gal in there that kind of rubs us the wrong way as her character, and so we play with that every night and have the different people come in and they react to her differently.
You shoot her down a little bit?
We shoot her down a little bit. We laugh behind her back. She drives us crazy, things like that. So everybody that comes in reacts to her and to other people differently, and in between we can talk to each other and as a character and see what comes up with the different people, and it's wonderful because every weekend is different.
That isn't scripted, talking to each other.
No, a lot of it is not. A lot of it is open and improv.
Me.
Yes.
I shouldn't say confused me. I thought it was brilliant because
Yeah.
I just thought you guys were up there sitting around talking.
Yeah, and we are. We are sitting around talking, and a lot of the stuff we came up with in the first week of rehearsal, and we've kept.
You know what I liked
So
was
it is kind of the script now.
you're sitting in the audience, and then pretty soon the lights just dim a bit. Somebody walks in, somebody starts adjusting the room,
Right.
and you're still talking in the audience to each other because the play hasn't started.
Yeah, they wanted to set that up
And then
kind of
you
like that
get
meeting
it-
feeling.
Yeah, then
where
you
walk
get
in.
what's
Right,
happening.
and all of a sudden you hear from backstage, we hear everybody chit-chatting, and all of a sudden everybody stops because they realize, they realize there are people on stage, and they have to stop talking now. Yeah, but it's a very profound play. It's very funny and it's very moving, and we're getting an audience. There's a lot of people in AA that come and see it, and we actually had 50 drug and alcohol women there one night, and it was like they were part of the theater. I
Do
mean,
they talk back to you?
Totally talked back. When you raise your hand and you say, "Hi, I'm Helen, and I'm
Right.
an alcoholic," the character, "Hi, Helen."
Do they talk back to you?
Totally, totally.
Well, what happens to you on stage then?
You go with it.
You talk back,
You
hello?
don't. Well, you don't. Well, you stay in your perimeter. You stay on the stage.
You know
never
how to
talk
do
to the
that. I
audience.
see.
Yeah, you
That-
never really go out
That's
there.
what's so hard to figure out if
Yeah.
you really do that.
You can't really break the fourth wall, or you shouldn't break the fourth
I
wall.
see, I
Yeah.
see.
You can hear them and let them affect you, but you can't really acknowledge their presence there.
But then when you have, say, Joe Montaigne there, or Nora
Who's coming in
Dunn,
this Saturday?
or
They're all coming this weekend.
Jude
yeah.
Chicolella.
Chicolella.
How do you react when your husband's on stage with
Well,
you?
my husband played a man who lost his wife of cancer, and then right after he does his piece, I get up and do my piece, and at the end of my piece, I'm to turn to him and say, "I'm very sorry for your wife, and your wife was really lucky to have you." And so I have to say this to him when he's doing that part. Your wife was really lucky to have you.
Do you guys
meaning
cry?
During every night is different.
I'll tell you that.
The
you
audience
did
is
cry.
crying,
You
but,
did cry. I couldn't believe all the tears that were on stage.
Yeah, and which is what happens in an AA meeting. I mean, you go. I did a lot of research, as
Did you?
all of us did.
Could
we
you
all
go
went
to meetings?
We all went to meetings, and we all saw what went on there. And I mean, everybody sits around and tells their stories, and there's a lot of crying and a lot of releasing and a lot of laughing, and so it's very real to that, very realistic. And it's fun for people who've never been to a meeting because they can say, "Oh, that's what that's about." Yeah.
But they also, it seemed to me that all the characters had parts of 100 people were written into each. Like one character was maybe a compilation of 5 people.
Yeah, I think
with the problems.
Right. I think Gary, a lot of it is based on a lot of the people he's known in his life, and they're all thrown in there together. My character Helen works at a sex club and can't
Oh, I
stop
know.
drinking. And
you were so pathetic.
It's she's a sad character. She can't get it together. She just it's really hard for her. And,
Did you have to go to some lap dancing places
No,
to see what was
I did in the Boom Boom Room once, which is a play about strippers, and
right.
I went and I got a job in a strip joint for one night. They wanted me to get up and dance, and I said, "I'll do it tomorrow, I promise," knowing full well I wasn't going to go back. And I waitressed and I watched and I talked to the girls, and then
you
I never
did?
went back the next day. Yeah. Yeah,
Could you-
so
that's so-
I drew on that for this,
Did you?
A little bit,
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
because-
that life is a whole other life. It's when the lights go out at night, and people are sleeping, and there's this whole other world going on out there. It's you never know. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
and
that was
scary
very
and
moving.
sad.
It was
Yeah.
very moving because you're very small, and for you to be standing on stage and having such intense feelings about
Yeah.
what had happened to you,
Yeah.
how you had to go through it, and you just fell apart.
Yeah.
We all fell apart.
So, yeah,
Well, I'm
it's-
glad you came here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun. A lot of
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you.
And see Sylva Kelegian, who comes from a very musical family.
Yes.
See her on stage. And don't go away because we'll be right back with author Jonathan Worlde. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back. I'm with Jonathan Worlde. Jonathan, we know you have a German Latin background, that you're a musician who lives in Northern California. We also know that this is your first book, Latex Monkey with Banana, and it's an award winner. But I don't know anything else about you. Tell me a little bit about your heritage, because I think that was part of what the background of this book is.
Yeah, well, it's a German on my father's side and a mixed Scottish and Hispanic on my mother's side. And, my mother's grandfather allegedly rode with Pancho Villa. But that's all that I know about that family legend.
Do you think it was true?
Well, I've gone down to Chihuahua and kicked the dust around a little bit, but I don't know. But after school, I worked for almost 15 years in the film industry.
I saw that a little bit, that you made
documentary and news films. In fact, I consider these ladies here behind the cameras as my colleagues. And it was only much later that I started writing, and so I've always written with kind of a visual style that originated from my fascination with film.
So the idea is explaining every single thing, the visuals, when you're writing, so that you see it.
Yeah, there's different ways to write, but I always write very visually, and I was always completely into this whole noir film sensibility long before noir became a new popular thing to go and see.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born in San Diego.
Oh, you're a native Californian.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
But then raised on the East Coast, and then much later the family moved out to Oregon, and so I went to University of Oregon before I started the film career.
So were you in the film school in Oregon, or how did you get into the film career?
I majored in film production in Oregon, and then I went, through a friend, I went to the East Coast and started working in news during the whole Watergate era.
So you went right to Washington, D.C. then?
Worked on Capitol Hill, and after a few years went to Germany and worked in the German film industry.
Oh, you did? All doing documentaries?
All doing news and documentaries. So doing the technical side, production, and also in Germany as an English language correspondent.
Well, then how did music fit into your life?
Well, I played sax in high school, and then much later, when I fell in love with Latin music and I wanted to join a Latin band, I dusted out the saxophone and started playing, and joined a Latin band in Washington, D.C., and played for 4 years in a band where I was the only gringo.
Is that right? And so where did they play?
These were all Central Americans. Well, that's actually part of the whole context of the book, is that there is an amazing number of little Latino music clubs in Washington and in all of the suburbs. And every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, these places are just packed with Central Americans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, who were there to appreciate their music performed by their own musicians.
So now enter the novel, and it really came about because of your music, right? And the idea of the novel has to do with being in Latin clubs, musicians.
That's right. It was just after so many years and so many experiences in these clubs, the idea came to me, well, this would be, I've got more than enough material for a novel, and I sat down and writing it.
But why did it come to you? Why did you think that you could write a novel? You went into a club, you played every night, or you played a lot. Were you working during the day doing something else?
Yeah, I was working during the day. As I said, I had been in film production.
But were you still doing that?
No. Then in Washington, I worked for a number of years for the Central American Refugee Center.
Oh, so you were in charge. So you were in contact.
Involved with the Central Americans and traveling to Central America also.
Oh, you were. So you kept. So you were getting Latino, Latin feeling.
Right.
More so than.
And part of the book, aside from just trying to deliver the incredibly rich atmosphere and the material that you come across in those kind of clubs, there's also a little bit of a subversive intent of the book, which is namely to show the normal American reading audience that Latino is not just one monolithic thing.
That's what I was going to ask you.
There's such a diversity of culture. There's such a difference from Puerto Rican to Cuban to Tex-Mex to salsa, merengue, cumbia.
That's all the music that would go with different areas?
All the music, yeah. And these people, they all treasure their culture and they love their culture, but at the same time there is a very sharp differentiation among themselves.
So they all speak Spanish?
Yeah, they all speak Spanish.
And do they speak it, like Cubans speak it differently from Puerto Ricans, speak it differently from South Americans, or?
Certainly, and they of course, they could all detect that. They would know who they're having a conversation with, whereas we obviously would not. It's kind of like the way that for the American experience, the way that Garrison Keillor has made almost a career out of the northern Norwegian,
Right.
German immigrants, as opposed to an Alabama
Southern.
cracker or something. Well, there is just as broad a range of experience and culture amongst what we just consider the Latino culture.
So we don't look at Latin music and Latinos as one and the same. Obviously, you've differentiated right there.
That's right.
But the words all seem to be the same, and the clubs are homes to the large group, all the mixed Latino backgrounds.
They would tend to intermix, although there might be one club where they're playing mostly salsa, which is like the Puerto Rican-based
so the
music,
more Puerto Ricans
as opposed to cumbia, which is the more of a Central American music, as opposed to merengue, which
more
is
specialized,
which is more of a Dominican.
Did you play
music.
in all of them?
Yes, we played, the musicians I played with, they were primarily Central Americans, but we played all those types of dance music.
I want to get to what the title means. I don't want to run out of time with you. What does the title mean?
Well, the latex monkey, there's a tie-in to Brazil, and in the Amazon jungle, the rubber harvesters, they make these little raw latex figurines, which they primarily sell to tourists. So lots of different little figurines, including like little monkeys. And the latex monkey is actually a clue in the book, but there is a monkey who's got a banana and he's doing something else which I really can't describe on camera.
Okay, I see, because the clubs in the book seem to be so dangerous. Or did you override them, these scenes? I mean, were they really this dangerous? Were they really that raunchy?
Well, I actually underwrote the scenes.
You did?
There's in these types of places, when people start drinking on the weekend and there's music and dancing, then almost every night knives come out and occasional shooting, and I had to edit and underwrite the scenes.
Is that right? I think also there should be a dictionary in the back of the book, because all the way through, like, you'll use bruja, which means
witch,
or puta,
which is their word for a prostitute,
and gringo,
which is a gringo,
and a morena,
which is a dark-skinned woman,
and lots of naughty, dirty words.
Lots of naughty, dirty words.
Did you learn those while you were in the clubs?
Yes, I learned all those from my colleagues hanging out with them.
Do you speak Spanish?
And I do speak Spanish, but you come to start thinking just naturally in some of those phrases and using them in the clubs.
Did you? Yeah. So, were you ever in jeopardy as a musician in one of those clubs?
Not exactly, but only minutes after I left the club one evening, there was a man who was shot dead at the counter where I had been sitting, and we understood that it was a contract killing.
So you wouldn't have been hurt anyway. You would have been okay.
Well, bullets can fly.
What about the characters? Were they real people to you? Is it autobiographical in a certain sense of the terms?
In a certain sense, in that the protagonist plays a saxophone.
Yeah.
That's where the autobiography stops.
But you play another instrument too, don't you?
Well, I play also guitar, but saxophone is the main instrument.
In this book, but...
no, I play primarily saxophone.
Oh, do you, when you were in the group?
That was my horn in the group.
So it stops there?
Well, the autobiographical stops there, but then the other colleagues in the group, it's really, in a way, it's also kind of a love letter to those other musicians who I played with. They're fictional names, but they're real people.
But you were writing about their experiences.
Yeah, they're real experiences.
And so we have some murders, we have some stuff going on.
Yeah,
were those things actually happening?
Well, I certainly didn't witness as many murders as are in the book, but I
heard, did you?
I heard from credible, reliable sources.
How since you're so much into all those cultures of the Latin, of lifestyles of the Latin culture, how are those cultures influencing America now?
Well, when I was playing in these clubs, this was right in the early 90s, and at that time you could see that Latin music was going to be the hit of the future. And now we have the Latin Grammys, and everybody loves and is dancing to Latin music. Aside from that, I think not only the Hispanic influence, but speaking specifically of Hispanics, I think that the Southern cultures, they help kind of loosen and break things up in America. Otherwise, we would be all these just really kind of boring, serious white people who wouldn't know how to party. But the Latino experience, and of course also the kind of the West African experience, has really made America kind of a cultural mix which is able to create some of the most profound music and art in the world.
You come from more of a musical approach to the culture because of, I guess, your experience. But I can see influences in the arts, in the fine arts, and in fashion.
Certainly, yes. Yeah, but I can only speak professionally, so to speak, from the music angle.
So how did your friends react to this book?
Oh, they love it, and one way that I have promoted the book, not with my original friends from that group, but up in San Francisco, I play with a jazz group, and we have done book signings and public events with music, so that rather than reading from the book, we show up with a jazz group and we play some Latin music, and then talk a little bit about the book, but make it mostly a musical experience.
So you live in San Francisco, so it's easy for you to, is that the same group that you've played with for a long time, or?
Well, I played with these are non-Latin musicians now.
Oh, I see, so you play a different kind.
I played with these jazz musicians for a couple of years in San Francisco now. Yeah.
Well, I think Latex Monkey with Bananas is going to take over. It's already taken over Northern California, so you have to come to Southern California and start having some sessions for us. Okay,
I'll be happy to do that.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles today. And keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 900, not 100, 917. See you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles. Good.